So I'm ordained within liberal Protestant denomination, and so I honor this as a thing that I have to do for my own life, for my own spiritual life. I need to go back to the Word of God. I don't tend to interpret it literally, but I tend to go to it for guidance. So if I want to grow spiritually, I know that I have to have some reliance on what God has said to my brothers and sisters in ancient times, and to just try to see what does it do for me today. So that's the practice that I do, and it's called Lectio Divina. It's from the Latin, it means reading, like a divine reading or divine lesson. And the structure of it is really interesting and nice. I like to do this practice before I have to preach, which is, proclaiming the Word of God to others. I try to see, before I go to study it, to understand what it was meant to say in its own time. I go to it fresh, as if, asking God, what is it in this passage or in this particular text that is speaking to me? That's because in liberal Protestantism, human experience is very important. Not just what God says, not just what the church has done, but how do I relate to it? What does my own personal history, my own experiences, my own understanding of my own suffering, my vulnerability to the world, my dependence on God, how does that play into what I hear or what I read? Does that make sense? Yeah. So this practice is really life-giving to me, because it allows me to see words in a book that have been used to oppress and exclude brothers and sisters from the communion, which I think is extended by God to everyone. I want to honor it. I want to re-experience it in a life-giving way. So that's my practice. I tend to go to it with fresh eyes, asking God, how is this guiding my daily walk with you? So my invitation is that we would do it exactly as it is prescribed, and this is practiced by people who live in community, monastic orders. So the Catholics practice this. My colleagues practice it as a way of doing youth Bible study, because they want the youth to hear the Word of God that seems ancient and irrelevant, with New Year's, valuing what they bring to it, And so it's used and it's used by evangelicals who really think the Word of God is alive and speaking, so they go to it. They might not do the practice in the way that it was conceived by this handout that I gave you, which comes really from the Catholic tradition, but I find it really inspiring. So my invitation, sometimes I have to introduce this to my students just the way I did with you, or Nancy did with you, because some of them come with a little bit of skepticism to some of the practices that I want to teach them, because they're used to interpreting the scriptures in a particular way. So, but I think that's the richness and the gift, is to invite them, what if you could just suspend everything you know and everything you've ever thought about it and hear it fresh, as if he was speaking, living right now, like it was leaping off the page just for your heart or your mind or your body or any part of you to connect with it. And that's the practice, to connect with whatever part of yourself, and then to have a few minutes to rest with that, like chewing on it. One of the writers called it chewing on the bread, like ruminating, like the cows do. They process their food for over and over, and then see if it has any relevance or any particular message for our lives. I chose intentionally some text, not to preordain what you're going to hear, but just a text that speaks about how Jesus understands good life on earth. How do we stay connected to God as we are humans on earth? What are we supposed to do? But I really welcome you to listen. So it's about listening, not reading.
I asked her, where's the handout for the text? I want the text.
It's really, because it's a really different process. I'm always curious about what I latch on to in the listening, which is very different when my eyes are running through the words.